Hold on just a dingleberry minute. Was that crocodile galloping over there? What species is that? Can I get a little more information here?
Yes, Crocodilus rumbifer, more commonly known as the Cuban crocodile, our world's most terrestrial crocodilian.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but that doesn't sound like voice. Who's in the stew today? Cause that's not what who is that? That's not voice.
Hey, my name's Cal Klinzing and I run the McCal's_outside page on Instagram. I'm a biology student, lover of the outdoors and wildlife, and a future wildlife filmmaker.
Well, it's incredibly nice to meet you, Cal. I wish the production team would let me know about guests beforehand, but let me just... And... done. That should have digitalized you into whatever weird voiceover realm that voice exists in. I hope you guys can get along. Now that that's out of the way, let's get back to our critter. What makes this crocodilian so much more terrestrial than other crocodilians on our planet? Well, let's get into that. Unlike most crocodilians, Cuban crocs spend most of their time on land. And on land, they are incredibly capable walkers, jumpers, and runners. Matter of fact, an adult Cuban croc can gallop at up to 24.1 to 35.4 kilometers. And in American, that's 15 to 22 miles per hour. Now, you may be asking, how are they so adapted for land living? Well, these guys have long and strong legs, with reduced webbing between the toes. These strong legs help them exhibit something known as a high walk, where their limbs are nearly perpendicular to their bodies. This allows for them to hold themselves off the ground, unlike other crocodilians, and the reduced webbing allows them to be able to dig into the mud and push off, almost like soccer cleats. Now, interestingly enough, they also have heavily keeled osteoderms, which are notable for being large bony plates that form a shield along the croc's body. This differs from the usual crocodilian species, whose osteoderms are oftentimes smaller and more scattered. Thank you so much for that introduction of our species. Now, this species of crocodilian is known to be a medium-sized croc. Now, the question here is, what is a medium-sized croc? How big is a medium-sized croc? And does this species express sexual dimorphism like, for example, our Goliath bird eater from last video, where the females were objectively huge and the males were objectively tiny? Let's get into that.
Yes, they do. Interestingly enough, unlike in the last video where the female Goliath bird eater was bigger than the males, in this critter, it's actually the males that are generally longer and heavier than females. As stated, sources differ majorly, with some sources such as Animalia stating that adults can generally get about 2.1 to 2.3 meters or 6.9 to 7.5 feet, while other sources such as Britannica and Smithsonian's Natural Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute are stating that they can grow up to as long as 3.5 meters or 10.5 feet. That gives us a pretty big margin of between 6.9 and 10.5 feet. The biggest specimen found, however, came in at a whopping 5 meters or 15 feet. With that being said, both agree that larger specimens are becoming less and less common due to how critically endangered these guys are. But more on that later.
Well, what do these sources say about their weight?
The majority of sources state that they average 70 to 80 kilograms or 150 to 180 pounds. Interestingly enough, that's about the same as Doc's weight, since he comes in at a generous 165 pounds.
Now, who gave Voice my weight? And why is Voice giving my weight to guests? You get one friend and you suddenly forget how to act. Suddenly it's all just rainbows and butterflies. Let's tell him company secrets. Let's tell him everything, right? Anyways, back to the critter. Crocodilians are known for living extraordinarily long lives. Does this seem to be the case with this species, or do they differ from the average croc? This is absolutely the case here. You see, in the wild, Cuban crocodiles can live up to 75 years. That's about the same as the average human in America. Interestingly enough, in captivity they seem to do worse, oftentimes living 20 years or less. Now, some of y'all may be asking, why do these guys live shorter lives in captivity? With our Goliath bird eater, tarantula species, these guys lived significantly longer lives in captivity because they could thrive. But With the Cuban crocodile, that's not the case. Let me explain further. See, as the name suggests, these guys only appear in Cuba, but specifically the freshwater and swamp areas of the Zapata Peninsula. Fun fact, this is actually considered the smallest geographical range of any of the living crocodilians on our planet. Now, due to this, it is relatively impossible to replicate their environment in captivity. You just can't do it. It's a niche environment that's only found, well, in Cuba. So it's hard to replicate that one for one in captivity. And due to that, their lifestyles change, and that does affect how long they live significantly, as it was shown earlier. Now, speaking of their lifestyle, these guys spend both some of their time on land and some of their time on water. Can you tell us more about their lifestyle, Cal?
Now, when on land, they spend a decent amount of time regulating their temperature. But let's explain why. See, crocodiles are incapable of generating heat metabolically. So instead, these guys spend their mornings, when they're cold and groggy, soaking up the heat from the sun. They also do this after eating, as heat speeds up their metabolism. Now, these are often hailed as a relatively curious and aggressive croc species. They are incredibly territorial, being very quick to defend their space. Now, they have been observed exhibiting what is suspected to be pack hunting behavior and coordination, but this isn't heavily studied.
Now, voice, I hope you aren't stressing our guest out over there too much. Better not, bro. Better not, because we need more guests around here. But these guys, like all crocodilians on our planet, are relatively carnivorous. Well, not relatively. They are carnivorous. So, could you tell us more about that? Alright, let's get into this diet thing. I don't want to keep the doc waiting. He can kind of get scary when he's angry. So, the adults of this species are observed to eat primarily fish and aquatic inverts. They will also eat birds, mammals, and even the young of their own species. Yikes. Cannibalism. On the other end of this, the juveniles have a much more modest diet. They'll only feed mostly on smaller fish and smaller inverts. Now to the portion that everyone's probably most interested in. Their hunting habits. Cal, take this one away, bud.
Now, remember earlier when we mentioned that these guys are considered a terrestrial croc species? This comes in handy here. This species is known for being a master of ambush predation. Oftentimes, they will lay incredibly still in murky water or shallow mud before striking at their prey with explosive speed. When that doesn't immediately cause the prey to land in their mouths, they can chase after their prey at up to 24 miles per hour. Now that's fast. Apart from that, adults have been observed leaping out of the water and using their incredibly strong tails to thrust themselves into the air and snatch unsuspecting birds and mammals on overhanging branches. That's just brutal.
Now, interestingly enough, this terrestrial lifestyle and adaptations for terrestrial life can actually be very handy when these guys need to skedaddle out of the water to avoid a predator. But speaking of avoiding a predator, what could possibly predate on something of this size? Good question, Matt. Sorry about the Australian accent. You see, juveniles are much more vulnerable than adult Cuban crocs. The juveniles have to worry about numerous different species of birds and fish that will absolutely take the opportunity to gobble them up the moment they have a chance. Not only that, but like I mentioned earlier, adult Cuban crocs are also known to cannibalize juveniles. Dude, it's a hard knock life. Now, as for the adults, they have to often compete with the much larger American crocodile, and a large American crocodile can easily dispose of a Cuban croc. Now, these meetings used to be few and far in between, but as of recent, the regions have begun to overlap more and more. We'll get more into how this is a problem later in the video. I'm not liking this. My sniffers are telling me that there's some bad news coming up. Cal?
Unfortunately, you would be correct. See, the Cuban crocodile is critically endangered with less than 3,000 individuals remaining on the planet. And beyond that, the usual causes such as habitat loss and humans hunting them for their skin and meat, which was unregulated in the past, it appears that hybridization is bringing down this species. The Cuban crocodile is a small freshwater specialist species found only in the Zapata Swamp and Lanier Swamp on the Cuban mainland. And as mentioned earlier, they are meeting more and more with the saltwater adapted species known as the American croc, which is widespread along the Caribbean coast. However, it appears that the ranges of these two species are overlapping more and more in areas where freshwater and saltwater mix. And due to this hybridization occurs, This is dangerous for the Cuban crocodile as it's critically endangered, and the more the two species mix, the more the world loses the uniqueness of the Cuban crocodile.
I knew my sniffers weren't wrong. I could smell the unfortunate news. Well, is anything being done to help this species or save it, or are they just doomed for extinction, and are we truly gonna lose such a beautiful species like this in our lifetime? I wish I was bringing you happier news, but the sad news continues, Doc, and I'm really sorry. You see, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, otherwise known as the AZA, has a program known as the Cuban Crocodile SAFE program plan. See, this plan intends to maintain a genetically diverse and healthy captive population in hopes to support wild population recovery and reintroductions if needed in the future. You see, the goal right now is to prevent their extinction while attempting to address threats such as habitat loss and hybridization with the American crocodile. However, more needs to be done. As we mentioned earlier, there's less than 2,000 to 3,000 individuals in the wild, and this number may be even smaller as surveys of this species have not been conducted since 2014. Now, I know this is really bad news, but one thing that you can do as the viewer today is avoid purchasing animal skin products even if they are marked as fake, so that you aren't contributing to the possible extinctions of this species or other beautiful gorgeous species around the world. At this point, we might title this video the Doom and Gloom of Despair video. Video started off positive, happy, cool animal, negativity, doom and despair. Let's try to, lighten this up just a little bit. Let's just teensy weensy bit. I'm gonna have Cal tell y'all about the reproduction, so at least we get to talk about crocodile babies, which are like the most adorable thing of all time.
Yeah, let's try to brighten this up a bit. The Cuban crocs are polygamous by nature. For those who may not know what that means, it means that one male will actually mate with more than one female. Breeding usually begins around May and will continue till August or even September. Not interestingly enough, how they build their nests is based on whether materials are available or not. More materials means females will build whole nests. Less materials means they'll dig holes in the ground. After the nest is sorted out, females will oftentimes lay 30 to 40 eggs, which will hatch in 58 to 70 days. Now, another sad statistic here, but sometimes almost 90% of hatchlings die due to predation on the eggs and the young.